I took some wild chances on on things that I didn't really believe that I could do, but I just did it anyway, and I failed terribly. But if I could go back again and do it all again, I'd do it the exact same way, because I think, failing is success, and I think there's a lot of value in that. And yeah, I've learned the most from the things that I didn't succeed at 100%.
I'm really glad to introduce and welcome everybody to this very special event from ScreenSkills. Tonight we welcome Shabier Kirchner, who's the winner of the Photography, Lighting and Fiction category at this year's Bafta TV Craft Awards for his work for Small Axe. Please welcome Marcus Wilson, a drama producer whose own work has included Luther, The A Word and Life on Mars, who will interview Shabier about his career, including Small Axe. A little later, we'll also be joined by Ian Glenister, who worked closely with Shabier on Small Axe. But for now, please welcome Marcus and Shabier.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And thank you, Shabier, for being able to be with us this evening. You look like you're in a very nice part of the world there.
yeah, old Vermont, great US of A. It's pretty warm today, it's nice.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us. Be great to just let's have a conversation about your work and particularly about Small Axe. I mean, congratulations again on the award.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it means a lot.
How did you? I think it'd be great to kind of go back to the beginning, really, in a way, and just kind of talk about how you came into the industry. I mean, first of all, how do you see the role of the cinematographer? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, role of the cinematographer. I mean, I think it's like, for me, it's just to help create a visual language based off of your understanding for the story and the understanding for what the director needs. And that is done through camera and lighting. And it's like, is it realism? Or is it expressionism? Or is it other? Are we going to use hard light or soft light? Are we moving the camera? Or are we not? Is it a long lens or a close lens? All of these things evoke feeling, and it's all really based on sort of, sort of like a form of psychiatry or visual psychiatry. I think Gordon Willis sort of said that best, And then, and to just be like present, and to be listening, and to work with your crew in a way that, I believe you sort of create a vibe on set. And a lot of people look to you, how you are emotionally, and, your physical endurance and your creative endurance and your emotional endurance. I think, it's like all of those things compile together, and all of those things end up in front of the lens. And, you control what's in front of that frame.
It's a brilliant job. I'd say it's a key role on any production. What kind of first attracted you to working in the camera department? What was your kind of first connection with, this could be something I want to do?
Well, I grew up, growing up, I just had like a really rough time at school. Like I had trouble with learning, and I still have trouble with reading. And, my dad had a lot of cameras around the house, and images were always something that I was surrounded by. And I just felt that I was just immediately attracted to, drawing and eventually photography as a way of expressing what I was feeling in a way that I couldn't really do with words, or, I couldn't do with writing. And so I just naturally gravitated towards the camera. And I was lucky enough that at the time, my dad had he had like a little dark room in our house when I was younger, and he would, shoot and develop 35mm still photography. Super 8mm photography was always around. And, now he's sort of painting all the time. And, he did a lot of underwater stuff. And so I would just sit for hours and just look through photo albums, and I think that's where I just the idea of being able to sort of understand who I was then, and who I am now, and you know where I'm going to be tomorrow is going to be a completely different reality. And it just helped me realize that.
It sounds like you kind of caught the bug very young. So what was the kind of route that took you from that kind of early connection with imagery to actually working in the film camera department? What made you think that was the route to go, and how did you make those first steps?
Yeah, I mean, like, because I grew up in Antigua, right? Born and raised in the islands, and so like I shot a lot of, you know, I spent a lot of time on the water, so I shot a lot of sailing. You know, big regatta community where I'm at, and I shot a lot of skating and surfing and kiteboarding, and you know, eventually started sort of forging a portfolio and an idea of, you know, this could be something I could do for a living, and to make, I would shoot wedding videos, I would shoot anything I could, hotels, you know, do whatever I could to try and earn, you know, just earn more experience behind the camera, really. And you know, if that I think I got sacked from a few different jobs. You know, my parents own a restaurant, and I tried to work behind the bar, I just couldn't do it. And so I just kept on coming back to it. And there was a point where I just realized, okay, like there was actually this Dutch filmmaker who there's like a lawnmower right behind me, so it may be getting kind of loud. There was this Dutch filmmaker that came to Antigua to do like a mayonnaise commercial or something like that. And he came to our school to teach us a bit about like what filmmaking was. And I just remember latching onto that like ferociously. And I just sort of like tethered myself to him. And he was kind enough, and he took me along and on these shoots, and I just sort of like sat there and watched. And I was sort of in awe of the whole process. I'd never seen anything like it before. And yeah, so I realized that that's like what I want to do. And you know, a few years passed, and I started looking at, you know, education was the only way that I saw my way into the industry. I was like, oh, I gotta go study this. You know what I mean? Like, this is the only way I'm gonna sort of make it in. And so I looked to apply to the NFTS, you know, film masterclass program in London, and I had like packed up all my shit in Antigua, and like I was like, you know, I'm leaving the nest, and I'm gonna go to this school, and I'm going to get a masterclass degree, and I'm going to be a DOP. And, you know, I was in Hawaii at first, doing a little surf thing. And I had made it down to like the final 20 sort of applicants. Uh-huh. And I had an interview with sort of the deans and a couple of tutors at the school to talk about, you know, if I would make it to the final round. And I was pretty confident with the fact that I was going to do that. And I didn't make it in. And I was so sort of heartbroken. I didn't really understand like how I was going to do this. And on my flight back, I ended up just staying in New York. Like, was connecting through New York. And I just stayed in New York City, and ended up just working. And, you know, very luckily, you know, a friend of mine was like, you can get a trainee position on a job that we're doing. And while I was on that job, like the DP, this lovely gentleman by the name of Thomas Scott Stanton, like gave me an opportunity to shoot second unit on this film. And I was like a trainee. I was just very lucky, and, you know, stand on the shoulders of people who have given me opportunities and trusted in the fact that I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I just said yes and trusted I'd figure it out. And yeah, and then I stayed in New York, and I worked for like 8 years. And then and it was just so bizarre, because then I got a call 8 years later. You know, now I'm shooting sort of indie films, and I'm doing art projects and whatnot. And then I get a call from my agents, and they were like, Sean Bobbitt wants to meet you. And I was like, what? Sean Bobbitt wants to meet you?
That's a nice call to get.
For what? I'm a huge fan of Sean, you know, like obviously the work he and Steve have done, you know, being hyper influential on me as a young artist. And so I was so hyped, but I had no idea what it was. And at that time, I honestly had thought it was something to do with my application for the school, which happened 8 years ago, because Sean was one of the tutors in the program.
So Sean was one of the people who turned you down.
Yeah, and he was very kind. He was like, "Light me to keep shooting. You know, you're on the right path." It was quite encouraging. And so when he called to meet me, I just had the assumption that he wanted to maybe talk about all of that. Hold on, this dude is getting really, really close.
If it's any comfort, we can't hear it.
Okay. And so I just automatically assumed it was something to do with that. But I was, we were talking and we met. We were like sitting in the Standard for like an hour, just talking about, art and films and stuff. And he was like, "So did you ever go to school?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? Do you not remember? Like, I was told like no. And the whole reason why I'm in New York now is because of that, or else I would be studying in London." And he was like, "What?" And he didn't remember that, but he remembered sort of like the position of doing that. And then we just had this really serendipitous moment. And he was like, "Well, actually, why I'm here is because I'm helping Steve look for a new cinematographer on the series he wants to do. I'm unavailable to do it, but I really have been looking for someone that you sort of like are checking all the boxes right now." And I was like, "What the hell is going on?" I had no idea that this was coming.
Yeah, that was a complete surprise.
That was a complete surprise, yeah. And then I spoke with Steve, and he was like, he told me a little bit about the project, and I was like, it sounded insane, but at the same time, I was just in disbelief from like the pilot episodes that I had read, like hearing, Trinidadian people on the page, hearing people from Grenada and Jamaica and Antigua on the page. It just like completely blew my mind. And so Steve invited me to become a part of the project. And
that's brilliant.
And then,
so that's a big meeting, obviously. How do you prepare for a meeting like that? What's your process in terms of getting ready for a conversation about a project that you're kind of that excited about?
It was actually it was a really, really quick conversation at first. I was sort of dreading it, but I had read the page, and Steve, it was very quick. He called me up, and he's like, in a very Steve way, was like, "Oh, mate, I've have you read the pages?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, I've watched all your work, and I love it. And what do you think?" And I was like, "Yeah." I just sort of remember some of the, I had read Mangrove at first, and I just remember some of the stuff that Althea's character was saying about us being the sort of protagonists in our own stories, and that was something that hit really hard. And so I spoke to him briefly about that, and he was just like, "Yeah, he was just like, brilliant, great, okay." And we spoke a little bit about sort of my history and my connection to the Caribbean, and then the phone call was over. It was like 15 minutes or something like that, and I was like, "What the hell?" And then I got a call like the following day, just being like, "Do you want to do this?" And it was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So
it sounds, for what is quite a big decision for director, that's
yeah,
clearly going with his gut there.
Yeah, just very, very grateful. Up to this day, I'm still unpacking why, so I'm just super humbled.
That's fantastic. So at what point did you become involved in it? How far before the shoot were you involved in, and what kind of prep were you able to do?
I came on quite early in the process. Like I had never, lived in London before, so they granted me, the producers, Mike and Anita and Steve, and Tracy and David, they all granted me an opportunity to get in at the foundation stages of prep. So I moved to London, and I just got to like get myself familiar with the land, and we went to the Tabernacle, and I met Althea, and through a lot, like I never feel like whenever I'm attached to a project, I never approach it with the feeling that I have a right to tell this story because of whatever reason. That's something that I have to earn, and that's earned through research and conversation, and and Small Axe was very much like a pilgrimage, beginning with prep for that process. And so it was just, these are real people, and they went through some real stuff. And so it was just understanding what that was. and I was unfamiliar with, you know, the Mangrove 9 at the time, like a lot of people were. And so just getting to learn about that was something that was very special and very important in that prep process.
Yeah, I think it must be quite interesting to come at something that you weren't aware of, so you didn't have any preconceptions about it. You were just kind of learning it and building your own version of that.
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of outsider's perspective in a way helped with this, with, you know, taking on a story like this?
I think so. I think there is value to bringing to coming from something with fresh eyes. You know, I think there is a lot of value to that. I mean, I'm still unpacking a lot of the decisions that we made, and a lot of the just a lot of the process. Like everything about this project I felt like was done on a very unconscious level. You know, like a lot of the decisions we made, a lot of, you know, prepping and shooting and post was done on a very sort of unconscious level, and that is something that I now realize, looking back on it, that there's a lot of value to operating on your impulses and operating on sort of your emotions and things that you feel that you may not be able to quite put into words. You know, and Steve very much sort of encouraged that. But I think coming at it from fresh eyes was helpful, and then also coming at it from the West Indies. I think, you know, I had a really comprehensive understanding of the people, you know, and it just got me really excited. You know, I've dreamt my whole life to like what West Indian people, capturing West Indian people in front of the camera, the way we move and the way we speak and what we eat and how we dance, and, you know, like that was something that I thought, you know, I held that as an asset and as something that I could bring to the project, you know.
Yeah, I think that kind of connection with your subject clearly shows. Because one of the things that struck me about the film is, you know, there's two ways of doing period drama. There's either the kind of, I'm looking at it through a microscope and examining it, or I'm there. And Small Axe was just so, I love the way you dived into every world.
Yeah.
And you took people in there with you. It's fantastic. When you're working with Steve, do you prep a lot, or do you have conversations in terms of, this is my shooting plan, or is it more fluid, more organic?
This one was interesting. Like, we jumped, like, I had never worked with Steve before. Obviously, like, Steve is like a North Star in my life. So I was extremely nervous coming into the project, and obviously standing on sort of in the shoes of Sean and what Sean and Steve have done in the past decade and more. So I kind of came in like over preparing for everything. You know, I had, like, you know, A, B, and C versions to each shot, and, you know, how we wanted to go about covering things and how we wanted it to look. And Steve just very quickly was like none of that. Like, you don't need to do like any of that. Just like, let's just talk about it. Let's just you know, let's try and figure out what the language for each one is as simply and as economically as possible, you know. And it was like, I was very fortunate because our production design team, Helen, Scott, and her team had, in our production office, had walls and walls and walls of archival photographs and archival like stills from films that were shot in and around that era. So each one we'd have a wall for Mangrove, and there'd be like hundreds of photographs there, stuff that, like, I don't know how many people have seen them before, but I could imagine not a lot. And so looking at that and going off of that, was a big jump off point as to how we want these films to feel as like individuals. And we approached each one, it was like, because it was 5 different ones, and we knew that we knew that they were going to be sort of bound together by the fabric of the people and the stories. And we didn't try and like homogenize the visual look just for the sake of doing it, you know. So we really peel back each layer to discover what the language of each film was, what the identity of each film was, you know. And Mangrove was something, you know, we started with Mangrove. That's the first thing we shot. And, you know, we knew that You know, we knew we wanted to represent an era that was very true to this archival materials that were available to us. We knew we wanted it to be almost like, you know, we wanted it to be a sense of community in one frame, you know, and that's how we decided on our aspect ratio. We wanted the 2:3:9 aspect ratio to hold all of our people versus the institutions in one frame, and almost like a Western in some senses. Like we were sort of speaking about like, you know, this one guy is like trying to turn his life around and just run a business, but the crooked sheriff is like fucking with his shit, you know what I mean? And it's like, so that was, there were elements of that involved in it. And yeah, and 35mm became just a key point in the conversation when it came to like how we wanted to treat skin tone and how we wanted to bring out the grain and the patina of the era. And so that's what we did for each one. We would sort of talk about it as we went forward and talk about it, and then we would shoot, and then the new script would come in and we would talk about Lovers Rock, and then we would shoot it, and then a new script would come in and we'd talk about Alex Wheatle, Red, White, and Blue, and so on and so forth. So it was very much, it was a lot to sort of digest all at once. And so we just approached it like a film, each one like a film.
So we when you were making those kind of, because they're quite big decisions about what medium you'll use, you were doing them on a kind of a response to each script, and just conscious of not wanting to repeat yourself to make sure they all had their own visual identity.
Yeah, exactly. It was that was very much it. Yeah.
And of the kind of the 5 films, do you have any, you know, favorites? I won't actually name favorite films, but in terms of the media you use, you know, do you prefer film? Do you prefer, you know, high definition video? Or
I have so much love for film, you know what I mean? Like I have so much love for celluloid. I just think there's so much value in the image it creates, the way it treats skin, the way I just think that there's something very special to it. But I also think the process in which we work with film as well is, there's a lot of value in that, you know. To be able to think in like an economical way, and not just sort of spin the camera and roll and roll and roll, and not to sort of really trust what you're doing as well, because you can see a finished image on a monitor. And I think, you know, for someone, I'm quite like sensitive to what I'm seeing, and, you know, other people around me seeing it as well, and I can sort of start second guessing myself, and, you know, based on somebody comes up and is like, that's you know, that's pretty dark or something. I'm just like, I mean, I'm trying to get there, and then it's like that. I take that with me. So I think I enjoy film in that sense, and I really respect it like that. I think that digital is, you know, it's another tool. It's another, you know, it's acrylics and watercolors. You know, it's like, it's different brush strokes, and we couldn't have done some of those films without having digital. You know, those were like, we needed to have an Alexa Mini, you know, to be able to move around the room for 45 minutes and not cutting. You know what I mean? Like we needed that. So I think they're both very valuable tools, you know, both of them, the mediums. And
I agree with you completely. I love film, and I think I looked like you were really kind of pushing and pulling the film at certain points. There must have been a moment of kind of going, I won't find out until tomorrow if I really nailed this.
Man, I remember our first day, we started shooting in the courtroom, and I was like, we tested, like, our producers were amazing. I got a lot of test time. We tested like every scanner under the moon. We tested pushing, 1-stop, 2-stop, pulling, you know, equally, underexposing, you know, doing all of these different things. I mean, at one point I was like, maybe let's try and do some like bleach bypassing, and I was like, no, we can't do anything. It's too crazy. And so we ended up pushing Mangrove a couple stops for certain scenes, and, you know, I just remember we just didn't get our rushes back. The first couple of days of shooting, we didn't get them back because of something to do with our start date, Cinelab or whatnot, who are fantastic, by the way. But we just wouldn't get them back for a couple of days. I just spent the first couple of days of the shoot just being like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I pushing it too much? Like, why am I underexposing it so much? Or why am I, you know? But it came back, and I sort of had a really strong response, and was like, okay, this is maybe too much, and this is maybe not enough, and we can sort of find a middle ground there. So it was great. It was exciting to work like that.
Yeah, it's very forgiving usually.
Yeah. It's like, you know, it's like, it makes me look really good. I'm like, you know, I feel like films really saves my ass most of the time, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And before you were talking about the kind of the cinematographer's role, and I think it's very clear that your conversations with Steve and is it Helen, the production designer,
Yeah,
kind of the creative core of it. But you work with a huge team. How do you interact with the departments?
I just want everybody to have skin in the game. You know what I mean? Like, I want everybody to have read the material. I want everybody to sort of to feel what it is that we're trying to achieve on like a level that, as like like you craftspeople, yes, first. Artists, I think that's equally as important as being a craftsperson. Like you got the position for the job because of your ability. Your CV proves that you can operate a crane, or you can pull focus, or you can do all these things. I'm more interested in like how do you feel about the world? You know what I mean? Like, how are you connecting to this material, and like give people full agency to be like, we had our key grip like suggesting, we just couldn't crack it some days, and like key grip would come up and be like, actually, you know what, like we think like, what do you think about this frame right here? I mean, based on what the character is going through. And it's just like yeah, that's Steve would always say, best idea wins, and that's it. And it'd be like, great. And that would happen all throughout production. Everybody had agency. And I think that's a really important thing. And when you feel that happening throughout a whole crew, the reverberation of that is like intoxicating. It's infectious. And
that's fantastic. And that's one of your, probably one of your most key relationships is with your gaffer. And we're looking to have Ian, your gaffer, joining us this evening.
Ian is a crucial elements to these to helping to tell the stories.
Brilliant. I think Ian's there sitting on Zoom. So if you can unveil yourself.
Yeah. There he is.
Cheers, Ian. So, thank you for joining us.
That's all right.
It'd be lovely. I suppose I should start with the kind of same question I asked Shabier. Can you tell us a bit about your role and how you see the gaffer's role on a production?
For me, it's a supportive role. He's the artist. I'm a paintbrush, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? He can't do it without us, me, the electricians, the crew. But we're all a cog. But it's a supportive role. As much as there's times we suggest things, we are support. We're support to these talented people, and that without us all working towards the same goal, I just think it's amazing, what we do.
It's really great to be able to like I'm quite like I wouldn't call myself the most technical of people, and I'm like totally okay with that, because I have so much trust in people like Ian and his crew, and Tommy, our first, and his crew, and Adrian. And it's like to go and be able to describe a feeling or describe an aesthetic or quality of light, and have someone like Ian take that and interpret it in a way that is achievable, is really great. I'm just like, here's a photograph of that Eggleston took at night, and this is the light, and it looks like we're underwater. Like, what do you think? And then we would go, mangrove. That whole exterior was like really cool. I thought it was like the way we created that was like Ian and Paul and took that photograph and we figured out a bunch of different ways, and the technical limitations that presented obstacles ended up giving birth to a way that was quite unique. And Ian can speak a little bit about how we went about achieving that, but I think it was
it's for me, you speak about that particularly, and it comes back to sort of the whole approach to it. It's a collaborative approach. We bashed our heads how to reproduce that, and it was just one of my dailies suggested, what about this lamp? And at that point I went, oh, of course. And it was Peter who went on to he worked with us as the rigging gaffer on the last section of the 5 films, but he brought something that I never even saw until he mentioned, well, you know, what about source fours to light, you know, off the top of the buildings and to give pools of light. And, you know, but that's the way we all work. I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's no stupid idea. Do you know?
Yeah.
It's you know.
Yeah, like hanging lamps out of people's living rooms, right? Like locations had to like get this whole crazy thing squared up, and like people's bedrooms had lamps like hanging out of them, pointed down onto the street to create pools that we could control. I just thought it was pretty remarkable that allowed us to look 360 and look up and down, and those could play as street lights, you know, and it just granted us a lot of freedom.
Yeah, it was great, you know. It comes back to it to get that, to achieve that. This is why I love our industry, because we embrace people for what they are. We needed locations to do something that would require a lot of painstaking talking, and there was a young, straight out of film school, young man called James. He has autism. He was quite open about it. And he doggedly knocked on people's doors to get us what we needed for that whole exterior nights. And he had a relationship with everyone. He was uncomfortable with what he was doing, but he still managed to persevere and get through it. And to me, I just thought, you know, it's a great industry for that. There's a place for everyone. You know, we all bring something to the table, and for that, well, you know, we got to thank James in a way, you know, because without his dogged approach, we would never have ever got what we needed there.
That sounds like you've got a real kind of team spirit going there. Yeah. How do you guys react when the plan goes wrong? Because, you know, you can prep and prep and prep, and you turn up on the day and the actor wants to be somewhere else, or the weather turns against you. How do you guys roll with that?
I feel like there's some instances on this shoot where that happened, and it's like some of the, what I think is some of the coolest stuff, you know. And it just this Steve is always like drilling home the fact that, you know, limitations are freedoms, you know. And I strongly believe that, you know, that there's like the creative idea and the creative intent of what you want to create in a shot or a scene. And then that sometimes is presented with technical boundaries and limitations. For instance, like that final shot in the mangrove where the camera swings around the room on a jib and goes into, you know, Frank's face, all in one shot. Like that, like we were racing the clock. We didn't have enough time. We knew what we wanted to make, how we wanted to make the scene, how we wanted to make the scene feel, but we didn't quite know how we wanted to get there at that point. And to take the camera off the jib and do all of this, it would have just killed us on a time level. So we ended up just sort of spinning this thing around, and Steve was standing by the monitor and he was like, wait, I got it. And just through, like, you know, by accident, he was like, we'll do that again. And we, you know, they were just moving the thing into place, and it span around the room and ended on Frank. And they were like, oh, okay, like this is working. So then we started jazzing off of that and being like, okay, what if we put a zoom lens on that as well? And we kind of drift across the room and we see all the defendants, but end up in Frank's face in a close-up. And we're like, yeah, let's try. And we tried that a few times. And then, you know, very similar things would happen to the lads on the roof. We'd be moving lamps around. It'd be a hard shaft that would cross up past somebody's face, and you'd be like, actually, that's it right there. What you were doing before, like go back a couple steps. And it was very reactionary like that.
Yeah, really important to be open to it.
Yeah, you be open to it and see it as I see it as an asset as opposed to a problem, you know. Like appreciate it. You see something that wasn't a part of the plan, maybe could be way better than what you've ever conceived of, you know. Like in Lovers Rock, I would never forget, we turned up that whole sequence outside the dance, like, you know, the final dance floor scene happens, and then the two lovers are on their bike riding, floating on cloud nine. And the idea of what that, you know, feeling was very clear to us, but how we wanted to achieve it wasn't quite clear. And we had all these different shots of the wheels and everything like that, and we showed up to the location, and we didn't have, this whole street had like a bunch of trailers or something parked in it, so we couldn't physically see it. So then we started like reacting to that and just drop the camera lower and let's frame out the street and like, oh, and this played back into what we were talking about last month about this feeling. And then it was just sort of, it just gave birth to something that's what you see in the final film, which I think is quite perfect for what it was, you know.
It sounds fantastic. Is it, I know I said I wouldn't ask this of you, but is there any moment that in the 5 films there's a favorite moment for the two of you where you felt like it either embodied what you were trying to do, or you both kind of stood there, looked at each other and went, we've nailed that? And it doesn't have to be the same moment.
For me, it was that moment in Mangrove. It was because it was quite early on in the shooting process, and it dictated, like it revealed itself like as an ethos to working and to making ourselves present and open to things that were happening and reacting to them in a positive way. And I think once that happened, you know, we had a pretty good understanding of how we wanted to go about reacting to moments. And Steve was always very clear: be present, be present, be present, you know, and listen and look and listen and look. I don't know, Ian, you may have something.
There's two things that stick in my mind about the whole process. There was one where the defendants all went back to the green room, and they came in and they were going to sit around the table and talk. And they came in and Steve was lying on the floor and he said, "This is where I want to see the shot." And it wasn't looking at the people, it was looking at their feet. And it was just how fidgety people could be, and just the reaction, the way people are, you know, where you get, some people are nervous, some people, he was looking at their feet, and it to me, you know, I'm trying to remember whether it actually ended up in the film, but to me, it just summed it all up.
It sounds like a kind of almost transformative experience for you both in terms of career and in terms of working methods. It sounds absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
What if it's not too early to say, do you know what's next for you both?
I'm still sort of digesting what happened on Small Axe. Yeah. You know, I'm still full off of that experience. I'm currently on a film right now. We head to South Korea to shoot, and in the meantime, I'm just developing a book, you know, to direct in the Caribbean. I just want to keep telling West Indian stories, and keep pushing forward on that frontier, and you know, sending the ladder down to everyone else, to opening up the door, leaving the door open for whoever wants to come through it, you know. Yeah.
Brilliant. Ian, what's next for you? Or are you on something at the moment?
I'm not on anything at the moment. It's funny because I, as much as Shabier wants to tell, you know, minority stories or Caribbean stories, I'm a big believer that there is more to Britain than just old men's stories. You know, I try to work on specific jobs. I'm looking to work on jobs that are women telling stories about women. I'm lucky. I've worked recently with Fable on Rocks. I've worked. I love Fable. They always bring a women's story told from women's point of view. I like working with them. I'm very big on trying to get more people within my department that are of a minority and are young ladies, because in a department that is predominantly white men, it doesn't represent the society I live in. I'm keen to do that and to work on jobs that are about minorities and about women. I just think it's better that way. I think our society is more than what we're always told it is. I grew up in a world that was very multicultural, you know, and I want to see that. I want to see that represented, and people who tell the stories and so on.
It sounds like you were both the perfect people for the perfect job. It sounds like Small Axe was exactly who that show needed, and you needed that show. I think it's fantastic. We've been getting a few questions. The first question here, I think we've got about 10, 12 questions, so let's try and go for some quick answers. But question to you both: what's the most important thing you've learned in your career?
Go, Shab.
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Such a difficult question to ask. I don't. The most important. I mean, like I think I took some wild chances on things that I didn't really believe that I could do, but I just did it anyway, and I failed terribly. But if I could go back again and do it all again, I'd do it the exact same way, because I think, failing is success, and I think there's a lot of value in that. And yeah, I've learned the most from the things that I didn't succeed at 100% than the things that I have.
Ian?
For me, probably looking back over my life, even if there's a way of saying it, is when someone's talking, listen to understand, don't listen to reply. If you understand what someone wants, and you have a better chance of giving them what they want. Sometimes people will say nothing, therefore it's freelance to do what you're being trusted to do. That to me is it, really.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's a key thing in this business. A lot of people like to talk. More people need to listen. I think that's very true. Shabier, you've talked about Sean Bobbitt before. Did you ever feel, his kind of influence on small acts, or that you need to do something different to him? That it's something that happens to a lot of DPs when they go onto series, that they feel they're not sure how to react to what's gone before.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are moments that, Sean was just such an influence on me in general growing up. Those were like his whole thing is just like kind of a part of me, regardless of small acts. So I think, but it was great because he was just, he met with me and we sat and chatted during prep, and he was like, make it your own. Do what you're called here to do. Make it your own. Don't try and do anything that you wouldn't necessarily do. And
I think that's a really healthy attitude.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're both kind of in senior roles. What advice would you give to people now wanting to enter the industry, and the steps you think they should take to get into your roles?
I mean, like, I know
it's a big question.
I think it's a big question, and there's no right answer to it. Like, like I said earlier, like I thought that my only way to be a DP was to get this masterclass program, and I didn't do that, and I ended up, doing it through the other route, which was just working. And I think the things that kept me on track during that, because I feel like cinematography or filmmaking in general is like, it's not like music where you can pick up your guitar or your drum kit and you can flex that muscle in your spare time, and you hear a note in your head and you can flex it. It's like, how do you keep that fresh? How do you do it when you're not physically shooting? And it's just like, I just look at a lot of photography. I look at a lot of images, and I try and figure out, I look at my own work as well, and sometimes try and figure out why I did those things, why an image looks the way, why the choices were made, and just try and understand like the ethos behind creating images and the emotional impact they have. In the interim, just shooting and shooting as much as possible to the point where you have like, agency to be able to choose what speaks to you personally, and what doesn't. Saying yes and no sometimes can be the most important thing you do. But in the beginning, I would say just like shoot and look, and like Ian said, listen, and just do it, because it's like understanding the language of cinema is something that I think is one of the most valuable things that I've taught myself.
What about yourself, Ian?
Advice? I don't know.
Yeah.
Keep trying, never give up is one thing I'd always say to people, but be nice, be kind. It's you know what, be respectful of everyone, from the runners right the way through to the cooks. These people play a big part. Be respectful, you know, and it's important. Your language, how you treat others, shows what you are. It really does.
100%. Like I said earlier, it's like, it's now become less about when I hire who I want to work with. Is less about the technical prowess and or what they can bring to the table as technicians. It's more about what they can bring as human beings. I think that is the most, like, for me, that's invaluable, you know.
And do you both try and keep the same crew together from job to job, or do you like to mix it up, you know?
I feel like every job I leave with a couple like soulmates, you know what I mean? And I think it's just like, I think it's great to be able to carry those soulmates with you on your life's journey. But then if I didn't switch it up, I wouldn't meet new soulmates, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I think I kind of like to keep it, I kind of like a mix of both. It depends on the job, you know. But I love working with new people and I love working with my friends. So.
Yeah. No, I think it's one of it's one of the great things about the industry is the way that different teams come together for a sole purpose. You live in each other's pockets for 6 months, and then you split again, and then you meet up 3 years later like you've never left.
I know. It's like I attributed it to like the sailing industry. You know, like you're on like your crew on this boat, and you're like sailing around the world, and you end back up in the same port as everybody else. And you're like, oh, tell me about your world adventures. And you guys get onto the same boat and go around the world again and then back up in another port. And you see, it's like, and you see how those people have changed throughout the journey, and it's beautiful. It really is something beautiful.
I realized I didn't ask, how did you guys come together? I mean, you know, you feel like, you know, you've been working together forever, but how did you guys come together?
Sean Bobbitt. Sean, if you're listening, bless Sean, man. I got so much love for this dude. But yeah, I was like, who? It was only like, he was just who, like, because I didn't have any crew and I didn't know anyone in the UK really. So I was kind of, you know, leaning on people to give me recommendations, and Sean gave me Ian, and we spoke with Ian. I think we just had one meeting, and it was legendary after that. It was great.
It's definitely the shortest interview I've ever had in my life. You know, when a man walks up to you, puts his hands out, thank you for doing the job. But that's good enough for me. I wish all interviews were that short, that's for sure. Anita and Mike Elliott gave me a harder time beforehand. But Shabier's was definitely the shortest interview I've ever had.
Clearly a man who knows what he wants.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Is there anything else you guys would like to say to our audience? You know, I think it's looking at the questions, it's a real mix of people with some experience and people who are just trying to break into the industry. Is there any kind of parting advice you'd give to that audience?
No, I mean, I think Ian said it great about kindness and humility and ethics, work, keeping the door open for those of us behind, and because, you know, that we stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us, and I wouldn't, you know, I don't think any of us would be here if it wasn't for the opportunities that people gave us. So pass that on, you know, and I wouldn't, you know, I don't sleep on knowledge. If I know something, I'm more than happily share it, because I'll probably end up learning something else through the act of sharing it with others. So if anyone has any questions about anything, I may not have the answer, but if I do, I'm more than happy to share it.
That's great. Yeah. I think we should kind of hand back to Natalie to round us up now. I think that's I think
Thank you so much for running that.
Thank you, Marcus. Cheers.
It's been fantastic to listen to you guys.
Yeah.
No, thank you guys. Thank you so much to Shabier for sharing all that knowledge with us, and for sharing your journey and telling your story, because you're exactly right, Marcus. I think there's so many different people in our audience, from people who are just starting out and wanting to sort of emulate your path and your awards, obviously, and your experience, to people who have a bit more experience and are actually enjoying sort of the technical aspects of the conversation as well. So I really want to thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you to Ian as well for sharing as well, and bringing that idea of how you two work together and how you make magic. And thank you, Marcus, for taking the time to spend with us and ask all the questions. Thank you, everyone, and good night.